anyone else, Ian O'Reilly hoped to catch a glimpse of wildlife whenever he ventured into nature. The mere sight of a buck in the forest or the sound of a birdsong made him feel so alive. But Ian was about to get much closer to the wild than he ever wanted. On a cold afternoon in 2020, he set off on an excursion with his family. When an uninvited guest crashed their party, Ian made a split-second decision that changed their lives forever. Because in the next instant, he had a razor-sharp set of fangs drooling over him. Although the O'Reillys called New Hampshire their home, they spent far more time outside the house. Ian and Allison passed on their passion for the great outdoors to their kids before they could even walk. But the parents never expected to place their children in danger. See, around the O'Reillys' home in Exeter, police were trying to track down an animal culprit harassing locals. One 62-year-old woman and her frightened dogs had to flee when a predator chased them out of the woods. Another resident got a much better look at the beast. He was just driving down the road when a wild coyote attempted to attack him through his car. The glass and steel protected him, but it didn't make sense why the animal was so aggressive. Allison and Ian heard these reports but didn't worry about them too much. After all, New Hampshire was a big place and full of wildlife. They wouldn't let a couple scares ruin their plans for a wintry hike in 2020. The five O'Reillys were retracing a trek they'd completed just a few weeks prior. It took just about 2.5 hours, the perfect amount of time to stretch their legs without tiring the kids out. What could go wrong? The second journey began much like the first. Everyone took in the picturesque views and shared jokes and stories. They were having such a fun time that nobody noticed a stranger was stalking them. Against all odds, the coyote found them in the New England wilderness. The O'Reillys didn't see the feral canine at first until it announced its presence in the most horrifying way imaginable. It pounced on their preschool-age son. Allison yanked him out from under the creature, not yet realizing the threat they were facing. Instead, the couple was thinking it was a dog off his leash who just bumped into their son. Then the truth clicked in Ian's mind. This was no dog. This was a bloodthirsty predator, and they were the prey. Not knowing what else to do, Dad stepped between the coyote and his family. He was terrified of what would happen next. Ian's top priority was getting his wife and kids to safety. He yelled at them to run as fast as they could. Turning back toward the coyote, Ian lifted a heavy hiking boot and kicked its ribs with all his might. That only made the rabid canine even angrier. It knocked Ian to the ground, toppling him just as easily as it did his young child, and bit at his chest. Fangs tore right through the hiker's winter jacket and punctured his skin. Ian managed to spot his family vanishing in the distance, and he shouted for them to keep moving. At that moment, his terror gave way to anger. What business did this animal have for attacking his family? Ian was going to teach it a lesson. A talented endurance athlete, Ian clamped his hands around the canine's snout and squeezed its body between his legs. That completely shut off any airflow in the predator's windpipe. The coyote was very much interested in living, but so were we, he later reflected. Ian didn't let the coyote go, as it could easily sprint off and go after his kids. Exhausted, he kept up the pressure until the animal stopped breathing. He realized he'd killed the beast out of pure instinct. It was almost like a logical next step. Of course, Ian was much worse for the wearer. Every muscle in his body shook with fatigue, and he was bleeding all over from claw and bite marks. The father limped back to his family, and Allison whisked him off to the hospital. The O'Reillys had been surprisingly well adjusted since the harrowing attack. Allison's work as a PTSD trauma expert helped them all, though their youngest had trouble sleeping in his own bed afterwards. And this wasn't the O'Reillys' only brush with danger. As much as they traveled, the O'Reillys had their first brush with the uglier side of nature in their own backyard. Ian was startled when he heard his son utter a cry of delight, followed by a scream. It turned out that a raccoon, and a rabid one at that, was living under their porch. The vicious creature bit the O'Reilly boy on the knee. As Allison pulled him away from the raccoon, a scab on her hand was exposed to his wound. Both mother and son needed rabies vaccinations afterward, but made immediate recoveries. In a sense, Ian counted himself lucky. As unfortunate as the raccoon attack was, the family is hopefully predator-free for the foreseeable future. But Ian is still traumatized. The rustle of a bush still makes Ian's heart beat faster, but he doesn't let that fear keep him from outdoor adventures. He can at least take comfort in knowing he defended his family. However, a debate regarding natural predators is splitting wildlife enthusiasts all over the country.